"I'm going to take everything from you," was written in the letter that the millionaire received the same day after abandoning his pregnant wife, and he was horrified by what happened next. Jack Thornton gazed at the city from the expansive window of his penthouse on the 50th floor. The skyscrapers that rose majestically before him were a testament to his power and wealth. At 45, he was the undisputed king of real estate, a man who had built an empire with his own hands and with the ruin of others. His phone vibrated. It was a message from Emma, his 32-year-old wife. "Honey, we have a doctor's appointment at 4. I can't wait to see our baby." Jack frowned. Emma's pregnancy hadn't been planned, and although he initially feigned joy, the truth was that this child threatened to destabilize everything he had built. Not because he didn't have enough money, but because Emma had started talking about settling down and leaving a legacy for the baby. That meant fewer risks, fewer shady deals, less astronomical profits. He took a sip of his 30-year-old whiskey and looked at the clock. It was 2 p.m. In 2 hours, he should be at the clinic, pretending enthusiasm for an ultrasound. But Jack had other plans. His briefcase was already prepared. Inside were fake documents, credit cards under aliases, and enough cash to live comfortably for months. He had planned everything meticulously. He would disappear without a trace, thus avoiding the imminent divorce that Emma had begun to hint at, and that threatened to split his fortune in half. It's now or never, Jack thought. With one last glance at the city he had conquered, he picked up his briefcase and left the penthouse. In the elevator, he pressed the parking button instead of the lobby. His Porsche was waiting, ready to take him far away. As he drove through the city streets, Jack mentally reviewed his plan. He was heading to a luxurious hotel on the outskirts, where he would stay under a false name. From there, he would move his assets, dismantle his empire piece by piece, and rebuild everything abroad, out of reach of Emma and the authorities who were starting to ask uncomfortable questions about some of his businesses. The traffic was dense, as if the city itself was trying to hold him back. Jack drummed impatiently on the steering wheel, aware that every minute counted. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he saw the hotel sign in the distance. A smile of triumph formed on his lips. He parked the Porsche in the hotel's underground parking lot and, briefcase in hand, headed to the reception. The young woman behind the counter greeted him with a rehearsed smile. "Welcome to the Grand Mirage Hotel. Sir, how may I help you?" "I have a reservation under the name of Alexander Vega," Jack replied with the confidence of someone who has rehearsed a lie 1,000 times. The receptionist typed on her computer and nodded. "Of course, Mr. Vega. We have your presidential suite ready. Would you like someone to accompany you with your luggage?" Jack shook his head. "That won't be necessary, thank you." As he rode the elevator up to his suite, Jack felt the weight of the world lifting from his shoulders. He had done it. He had escaped. Emma, the baby, the businesses in danger. Everything was left behind. The suite was magnificent, fit for a king. Jack dropped his briefcase on the king-size bed and headed to the minibar. He needed a drink to celebrate his victory. That's when he saw it. On the mahogany desk, a white envelope with his real name, Jack Thornton. The whiskey glass slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor. How was this possible? Nobody knew he was there. Nobody could know. With trembling hands, Jack opened the envelope. Inside was a simple sheet of paper with a phrase that made his blood run cold. "I'm going to take everything from you." The paper trembled in Jack's hands. His eyes scanned the threatening phrase over and over, as if expecting the letters to rearrange themselves and reveal a less terrifying message. But the reality was undeniable. Someone had found him. Someone knew his plans. With his heart racing, Jack examined the rest of the envelope's contents. Behind the main note, he found a series of documents that left him breathless. Bank statements from accounts he thought were secret, photographs of undeclared properties, even transcripts of conversations he had behind closed doors. Whoever was behind this hadn't just located him. They seemed to know every dark corner of his life. He collapsed into the leather armchair, his mind a whirlwind of unanswered questions. Who could be behind this? Emma? No, she didn't have the resources or the cunning for something like this. A betrayed partner, an enemy from the past seeking revenge. The sound of his phone snapped him out of his ruminations. It was an unknown number. With a shaking hand, Jack answered. "Hello?" Silence on the other end of the line. Then a distorted voice. "How does loneliness feel, Jack? I hope you enjoy it because it's all you'll have left when I'm done with you." The call cut off. Jack stared at the phone, paralyzed with fear. The voice, though altered, sounded strangely familiar. Where had he heard it before? He spent the night awake, pacing around the suite, jumping at every creak, every shadow. At dawn, he made a decision. He couldn't stay there. He needed to move, to find an even safer place. With the first light of dawn, Jack left the hotel, leaving behind half of his belongings in his rush to escape. He drove aimlessly for hours, paranoid, constantly checking the rearview mirror for pursuers. Finally, he stopped at a roadside motel, the kind of place he would never have considered worthy of his presence before. But now, his anonymity was his greatest treasure. Once in the room, he turned on the TV, seeking distraction. What he saw left him cold. On every news channel, his face appeared front and center. The headline read, "Real estate magnate Jack Thornton missing. Suspected flight amid imminent fraud investigations." The empire he had so carefully built was beginning to crumble, and he wasn't even there to try to save it. His enemies, whoever they were, had acted with terrifying speed and efficiency. Desperate. Jack tried to access his bank accounts from his phone. One after another, he found them blocked, his credit cards cancelled. In a matter of hours, he had gone from being one of the richest men in the country to a fugitive without resources. Panic took over him. He needed help, someone he could trust. With trembling fingers, he dialed the number of Daniel, his partner and right-hand man for years. "Daniel, it's me, Jack. I need your help. I'm in trouble." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Daniel spoke, his voice sounded cold, distant. "I know, Jack, everyone knows. Where are you?" Jack hesitated. Could he really trust Daniel? He had no choice. "I'm at the Sunrise Motel on Highway 95, room 23. Please, come alone. I don't trust anyone else." Another pause. "I'll be there in 2 hours. Don't move." The call ended, leaving Jack with a mix of relief and apprehension. Daniel was coming. Together they could find a solution. They had to. As he waited, Jack mentally reviewed his life, looking for clues about who could be behind his downfall. He had made many enemies in his rise to power, had stepped on many toes, but no one seemed to have the resources or motivation to orchestrate something like this. Time passed with excruciating slowness. Every noise in the hallway made him jump. What if it wasn't Daniel coming? What if it was the police, or something worse? Finally, he heard footsteps approaching his door, then 3 soft knocks. Jack approached, holding his breath. "Who is it?" "It's me, Daniel. Open the door, Jack." With a sigh of relief, Jack opened the door. But what he saw on the other side was not the friendly face of his partner. Instead, he found himself face to face with his worst nightmare. Jack instinctively stepped back when he saw the expression on Daniel's face. It wasn't the look of concern or solidarity he expected from his partner and friend of many years. Instead, Daniel's eyes glowed with a mixture of triumph and contempt that chilled Jack's blood. "Daniel? What does this mean?" Jack asked, his voice barely a whisper. Daniel entered the room, closing the door behind him. His impeccable suit contrasted with Jack's disheveled appearance, who hadn't slept in the last 24 hours. "It means, my dear friend," Daniel said, spitting out the last word as if it were poison, "that the game is over. Your reign of terror and greed has come to an end." Jack felt the ground opening beneath his feet. You're behind all this?" Daniel let out a bitter laugh. "Me? No, Jack. I'm just another piece on this board. A piece that decided to stop being a pawn to become a player." With slow steps, Daniel began to walk around the room, looking with disgust at the decadent motel environment. "You know, for years, I convinced myself that you were a genius, a visionary. I justified every one of your actions, every shady business, every life you destroyed on your way to the top. I told myself it was the price of success. He stopped in front of Jack, looking him straight in the eye. But then I started to see the pattern. You weren't a genius, Jack. You were a predator, and I was your accomplice. Jack tried to regain control of the situation. Daniel, listen to me. Whatever you think is happening, we can fix it. Together, like we've always done. Think about everything we've achieved. Daniel shook his head, a sad smile on his lips. Achieved? What have we achieved, Jack? An empire built on lies and suffering. A fortune stained with blood. No, my friend, no more. Jack felt panic invading him. Daniel knew too much. If he talked, if he revealed just a fraction of the secrets he knew, everything would be lost. What do you want, Daniel? Money? Power? I can give you whatever you want. Just name your price. Daniel's laughter echoed in the small room. My price? Oh, Jack, my price has already been paid, in full. It was then that Jack noticed the small device on Daniel's lapel, a camera. You've been recording all this? Daniel nodded. Every word, every implicit confession. But don't worry, this isn't for the police, at least not yet. This is for someone who has much more interest in seeing you fall. Who? Jack demanded, his voice broken by fear and rage. Daniel headed for the door. You'll find out soon, very soon. For now, enjoy your last moments of freedom, Jack. The hell you created is about to claim you. Before leaving, Daniel stopped and looked at his former partner one last time. Oh, the hunter had become prey, and the pack was getting closer and closer. With trembling hands, Jack took out his phone. He needed to move, find a new hiding place. But first, there was a call he had to make, one last card to play. He dialed a number he swore he would never use again. After several rings, a deep voice answered, Well, Jack Thornton, I thought you said you'd never need me again. Jack swallowed hard. Jason, Jack spoke with a trembling voice. I've lost access to all my accounts. My company is under investigation. My partner has betrayed me. I need to disappear, Jason, like in the old days. Another silence. This one longer. Jack could imagine Jason weighing his options, calculating the risks and benefits of helping a man who had fallen from grace. All right, Jason finally said. I'll help you. But it won't be free, Jack, and this time the price will be higher than ever. Jack closed his eyes, relieved. Whatever it is, I'll pay anything. Not with money. Jason's voice was cold as steel. This time, the payment will be different. I'll see you in an hour at the old warehouse on Pier 17. Come alone and make sure no one follows you. The call cut off before Jack could respond. He stared at the phone, a mixture of relief and fear swirling in his stomach. Jason was dangerous, a vestige of his past that Jack had tried to bury. But now, he was his only hope. Cautiously, Jack left the motel, constantly looking over his shoulder. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat, every face a potential enemy. He took several taxis, changing direction multiple times to ensure no one was following him. When he finally arrived at Pier 17, the sun was already setting, painting the sky in shades of red and purple. The old warehouse loomed like a dark and threatening mass against the horizon. Jack entered, his steps echoing in the empty space. The smell of rust and salt water permeated the air. Jason, he called, his voice trembling slightly. From the shadows, a figure emerged. Jason, with his characteristic black suit and silver hair, seemed not to have aged a day since Jack last saw him. Jack, said Jason, approaching with slow, deliberate steps. Who would have thought? The great Jack Thornton, coming to me like a dog with its tail between its legs. Jack clenched his fists, fighting against the urge to respond. He needed Jason. He couldn't afford to offend him. Can you help me? He asked, getting straight to the point. Jason smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I can. The question is, are you willing to pay the price? I already told you yes. What do you want? Jason began to walk in circles around Jack, like a predator stalking its prey. You see, Jack, for years I've been building my own empire, one that operates in the shadows, far from the spotlights you're so fond of, and now I need to expand. He stopped in front of Jack, his eyes shining with a mixture of greed and triumph. "I want your contacts, Jack. All of them. Politicians, judges, businessmen. I want the secrets you've accumulated over the years. I want the evidence you have against the powerful people you've manipulated." Jack paled. "But that's all I have left." "My only protection." "Exactly." Jason nodded. "It's your ticket out. You give me everything, and I give you a new identity, a safe place far from here. It's that, or face whatever's coming for you." Jack felt the world closing in around him. Handing over that information meant losing the last vestige of his power, his last card up his sleeve. But what alternative did he have? "All right," he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'll give you everything." Jason's smile widened. "Excellent decision, my friend. Now follow me. We have a lot of work to do." As he followed Jason into the depths of the warehouse, Jack couldn't help but feel he had made a deal with the devil. But at that moment, hell seemed preferable to whatever was chasing him. What Jack didn't know was that, at that very instant, miles away, another meeting was taking place. A meeting that would seal his fate in a way he couldn't even imagine. In a luxurious penthouse in the heart of the city, 3 figures gathered around a glass table. The panoramic view of the nighttime city contrasted with the palpable tension in the room. Daniel, still wearing the suit he had on when he confronted Jack, paced nervously back and forth. On the sofa, a stunningly beautiful woman with a fierce gaze observed the scene with apparent calm. It was Emma, Jack's pregnant wife. Standing by the window with his back to the other two was a tall, distinguished man, Frank Larson, Jack's former rival and now, apparently, the mastermind behind the entire operation. "Are you sure he doesn't suspect anything?" Frank asked, without turning around. Daniel nodded. "Completely. Jack is desperate. He has no idea that all of this is our doing." Emma stood up, gently caressing her swollen belly. "Don't underestimate Jack. He may be cornered, but he's still dangerous." Frank turned, facing his accomplices. His face, marked by years and bitterness, softened slightly as he looked at Emma. "Don't worry, dear. Jack has nowhere to hide. Soon, very soon, he'll pay for everything he's done to us." Daniel approached the table, where several documents and photographs were scattered. "I've been monitoring his movements. After our encounter at the motel, he made a call. I couldn't trace the number, but whoever it is, it seems to be his last hope." Frank frowned. "We need to know who this contact is. Jack has always had aces up his sleeve. We can't let him escape now that we have him against the ropes." Emma approached, picking up one of the photographs. It was an image of Jack and her, taken years ago, when they were still happy. Or at least, when she thought they were. "I know someone," Emma said, her voice loaded with determination. "Someone who can trace that call and give us Jack's exact location." Frank and Daniel looked at her in surprise. Emma had always been more than just a pretty face, but few knew the depth of her connections and resources. "Are you sure?" Frank asked. "It's risky to involve someone else at this point." Emma nodded. "I trust this person with my life. Besides, we don't have another choice. If Jack manages to disappear now, our entire plan will fall apart." There was a moment of silence as Frank considered his options. Finally, he nodded. "Do it, but be careful. We can't afford mistakes at this stage." Emma took her phone and went out to the balcony to make the call. Daniel and Frank were left alone in the room. "Do you think it will work?" Daniel asked, doubt evident in his voice. Frank smiled, a cold and calculated smile. "It has to work. I've waited years for this moment, Daniel. Jack destroyed my life, my reputation, my future. Now it's my turn to take everything from him." Daniel nodded, but couldn't help feeling a chill. Frank's revenge was understandable, but the intensity of his hatred was terrifying. Emma came back in, her face illuminated by a mixture of triumph and anticipation. "We've got him. Jack is at Pier 17 in an old warehouse, and he's not alone." Frank quickly approached. "Who's he with?" "With Jason Morrow," Emma replied. The name fell like a bomb in the room. Both Frank and Daniel knew Jason's reputation. If Jack had turned to him, the situation was even more desperate than they thought. "We need to move now," Frank said. his voice loaded with urgency. "If Jason is involved, we could lose our advantage in a matter of hours." Daniel was already on his phone, making calls. "I can have a team at the pier in 30 minutes. Emma stopped them. "Wait, we can't just barge in there. We need to be smarter than that." Frank looked at her curiously. "What do you suggest?" An enigmatic smile formed on Emma's lips. "I know Jack better than anyone, and I know exactly how to make him fall right into our hands." As Emma shared her plan outside, the city continued its frantic rhythm, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the heights. Somewhere in that concrete jungle, Jack Thornton was fighting for his survival. Unaware that each step he took brought him closer to his final fall, the circle was closing, and soon, very soon, the empire of shadows that Jack had built would crumble upon him. Dawn found Jack Thornton in a state of nervous agitation. He had spent the night in a small room at the back of Jason's warehouse, surrounded by papers and electronic devices. For hours, he had emptied the contents of his mind and his secret files, giving Jason every piece of information he possessed. "That's everything," Jack said, his voice hoarse from fatigue and tension. "Every contact, every transaction, every secret. I've given you it all." Jason, who had been meticulously reviewing each document and file, nodded slowly. "Impressive, Jack. I always knew you were a man with resources, but this exceeds my expectations." Jack collapsed into a rickety chair, the weight of his decision falling on him like a slab. "And now what? What's the plan?" Jason approached a safe embedded in the wall and opened it. From inside, he took out a thick manila envelope. "Here you go. Your new identity, passports, credit cards, everything you need to disappear." Jack took the envelope with trembling hands. "Where will I go?" "It's better you don't know yet," Jason replied. "I'll take you to a safe place tonight. From there, you'll take a flight to your new destination. The less you know, the safer you'll be." Jack nodded, a lump forming in his throat. This was his reality now. Running, hiding, living a life that wasn't his own. Suddenly, Jack's phone vibrated. Both men startled. No one should have that number. "Don't answer," Jason warned. But Jack had already taken out the phone. The name on the screen left him cold. "Emma." It's my wife," Jack muttered. Jason frowned. "Don't answer. It could be a trap." But Jack, driven by a mixture of curiosity and an inexplicable feeling of guilt, slid his finger across the screen and answered. "Emma." The voice on the other end of the line sounded scared, broken by sobs. "Jack, thank God. I need your help. It's the baby. Something's wrong." Jack's heart skipped a beat. What's happening?" "I'm at the hospital," Emma continued. "The doctors say it's serious. They need to do emergency surgery, but they need your authorization. You're the father, Jack. Please, come quickly." Jack's mind was a whirlwind. Was this real, or was it another trap? He looked at Jason, who was vigorously shaking his head. "Emma, I can't." His mind a chaos of conflicting emotions and thoughts. Jason approached, his face a mask of concern and frustration. "You can't go. It's a trap. It has to be." "What if it's not?" Jack replied. "What if our child is really in danger? The same child you were willing to abandon a few days ago?" Jason asked, his voice loaded with disbelief. Jack shuddered at those words, the weight of his past actions falling on him with renewed force. I know. But this is different. If something happens to that baby and I wasn't there." Jason ran a hand over his face, visibly frustrated. "Jack, think. You've spent your whole life calculating every move. Why risk it all now?" But Jack was already on his feet, tucking the envelope with his new identity into the inner pocket of his jacket. "I have to go, Jason. I don't expect you to understand, but I have to do this." Jason grabbed his arm. "If you walk out that door, you're on your own. I won't be able to help you if things go wrong." Jack nodded, a strange calm taking over him. "I understand. And thank you for everything, Jason. Whatever happens, you fulfilled your part of the deal." With those words, Jack left the warehouse and entered the city streets, his heart pounding as he headed towards Central Hospital. Meanwhile, in a van parked a few blocks from the hospital, Emma hung up the phone, a triumphant smile on her face. "It worked," she said, turning to Frank and Daniel, who were watching her expectantly. "He's on his way." Frank nodded, a mixture of admiration and surprise in his gaze. "Impressive, Emma. I didn't think he'd fall for it so easily." "You don't know him like I do," Emma replied, her voice tinged with an emotion difficult to decipher. "Jack can be ruthless in business, but deep down, he's always had a weakness, his legacy. The idea of a child, someone to carry on his name, it's something he can't resist." Daniel, who had been monitoring several screens, intervened. "We have visual confirmation. Jack just took a taxi heading to the hospital." Frank stood up, his face a mask of determination. "Good. Everything is ready. Emma, you'll go in first. Daniel and I will be in position. Remember, we need him to sign the documents before he realizes the truth." Emma nodded, gently caressing her belly. For a moment, a shadow of doubt crossed her face. "Are we doing the right thing?" Frank approached her, taking her hands in his. "Emma, remember everything he's done, the lives he's destroyed, the families he's torn apart. This isn't just about us. It's justice." She took a deep breath, composing herself. "You're right. Let's do it." Jack arrived at Central Hospital with his heart in his throat. Every instinct in his body screamed that it was a trap, that he should turn around and flee. But the image of his child, of that baby he didn't yet know but who carried his blood, propelled him forward. At the reception, a nurse greeted him urgently. "Mr. Thornton, your wife is waiting for you on the 5th floor. Please, hurry." The elevator seemed to move with excruciating slowness. When the doors opened on the 5th floor, Jack saw Emma sitting in a chair, her face buried in her hands. "Emma!" he called. Approaching cautiously, she looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "Jack, thank God you're here." Before he could react, Emma threw herself into his arms, sobbing. "The doctors say they need to operate immediately. There are complications and—" Jack hugged her instinctively, feeling his resolution crumbling. "It's okay. I'm here. What do they need me to do?" Emma pulled away slightly, taking some documents out of her purse. "Oh, they need your signature for the authorization. It's a high-risk surgery, and as the father, you have to give your consent." Jack took the papers, his eyes quickly scanning the text. Everything seemed to be in order. Consent for fetal surgery, risks, procedures. "Where do I sign?" he asked, looking for a pen. Emma handed him one, her hand trembling slightly. "Here, and here," she said, pointing to 2 lines at the bottom of the document. Jack signed without hesitation, the sound of the pen against the paper resonating in the silent hallway. "Done," he said, handing the papers back to Emma. "When will we know something?" It was then that he noticed the change in Emma's expression. The desperation and fear had disappeared, replaced by a cold and calculating look that Jack had never seen in her before. "Oh, Jack," Emma said, her voice loaded with a mixture of triumph and pity. "Fair, we already know everything." Before Jack could react, he felt a presence behind him. He turned to find himself face to face with Frank Larson, flanked by Daniel and 2 menacing-looking men. "Welcome to your downfall, Jack," Frank said, a cruel smile on his lips. "You've signed your sentence." Jack looked at the papers in Emma's hands, realizing too late that he had fallen for the oldest trick in the book, trusting someone he had betrayed. The hospital hallway, which moments before had seemed like a refuge, now closed in around him like a cage. Jack Thornton, the man who always had a plan, found himself, for the first time in his life, completely cornered and with no way out. The silence in the conference room of Central Hospital was oppressive. Jack Thornton, once a real estate magnate and now a cornered man, sat at one end of the long table, his gaze alternating between the faces of his captors, Frank Larson, his former rival Daniel, his ex-partner and right-hand man, and Emma, his pregnant wife, whose betrayal still seemed incomprehensible to him. Frank was the first to break the silence. 25 years, Jack, 25 years I've waited for this moment." Jack, despite his situation, couldn't help but give a bitter smile. "You were always persistent, Frank. I must admit I didn't expect this from you." didn't you?" Frank leaned forward, his eyes shining with a mixture of triumph and contained fury. "Did you think that after ruining my life, my reputation, my future, I would simply give up? No, Jack. Every day of these 25 years has been dedicated to this moment." Daniel, who had remained silent until now, intervened. "It wasn't difficult, you know, finding allies against you. You've made many enemies over the years, Jack." Jack turned to his ex-partner, the betrayal still fresh and painful. "And you, Daniel, what did they promise you? A share of the spoils? My position in the company?" Daniel shook his head. "This isn't about money or power, Jack. It's about doing the right thing. About putting an end to years of corruption and lies." Jack let out a humorless laugh. "The right thing? Don't make me laugh. You were by my side in every deal, in every shady transaction. Your hands are as dirty as mine. The difference," Emma interrupted, speaking for the first time, "is that Daniel is willing to pay for his mistakes. You, Jack, have never taken responsibility for your actions." Jack turned to his wife, the pain and confusion evident on his face. "Emma, why? I thought you loved me. I thought we were a team." Emma gently caressed her swollen belly, her eyes full of a mixture of sadness and determination. "I loved you, Jack. Or at least, I loved the idea of you. The successful man, the visionary. But over time, I saw the truth behind the facade, the dirty deals, the destroyed lives, the constant pursuit of more power and money, regardless of the cost." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper loaded with emotion. "Do you know when I made my final decision? When I discovered you were planning to abandon us, me and our unborn child. It was then that I knew there was no redemption for you." Jack felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. All his actions, all his decisions, were crashing against him with overwhelming force. Frank spoke again. "But enough recriminations. We're here for business, Jack. The documents you just signed weren't for emergency surgery. They were to transfer total control of your companies and assets to a trust controlled by us." Jack paled. "No, you can't do that. My lawyers—" "Your lawyers have already been informed," Daniel interrupted. "With the evidence we have of your illegal activities, they're more than willing to cooperate to save their own skins." Frank slid a folder towards Jack. "Here you have two options, Jack. The first, you cooperate completely, confess your crimes, and help us dismantle your corruption network. In exchange, we'll negotiate a reduced sentence and guarantee that a portion of your assets goes to a fund for your child." Jack opened the folder with trembling hands. "And the second option?" Frank's smile turned cold. "You resist. We use every piece of evidence we have against you. You spend the rest of your life in prison, and your child grows up knowing that his father is a criminal who preferred his own ego to his family." Silence fell over the room again as Jack weighed his options. An entire life of manipulation and control was reduced to this moment. For the first time, he had no plan, no way out. He looked up, meeting Emma's eyes. For a brief instant, he saw a glimpse of the woman he had loved, of the life he could have had if he had made different decisions. Jack began, his voice breaking slightly. But before he could continue, the door to the room burst open. Jason Morrow entered, followed by a group of armed men. "Sorry to interrupt this touching meeting," Jason said, his voice loaded with sarcasm. "But I'm afraid I have to take my partner with me." Chaos erupted in the room. Frank and Daniel jumped to their feet. Emma instinctively stepped back, protecting her belly. Jack, for his part, remained frozen in his chair, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions and thoughts. In a matter of seconds, the fate that seemed sealed had reopened, offering him one last, unexpected chance of escape. But as Jason urged him to move, Jack found himself looking at Emma, at his unborn child, and at that moment he had to make the most difficult decision of his life. Chaos reigned in the conference room. Jason's men kept Frank, Daniel, and Emma at bay, while Jason himself approached Jack, urging him to move. "Come on, Jack," Jason said, his voice tense. "We don't have much time before the police arrive." But Jack didn't move. His eyes were fixed on Emma, On the way, she instinctively protected her swollen belly. At that moment, all his past, all his decisions, seemed to converge on a single point of clarity. "No," Jack said, his voice surprisingly firm. Jason looked at him in disbelief. "What?" "I said no, Jason," Jack repeated, slowly standing up. "I'm not running away, not this time." The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on Jack. Frank and Daniel exchanged confused looks, while Emma watched him with a mixture of surprise and caution. Jason moved closer, lowering his voice. "Have you lost your mind? This is your last chance. If you stay, you'll lose everything." Jack smiled, a sad and tired smile. "I've already lost everything, Jason. My empire, my reputation, the trust of the people who mattered to me. Running now would only delay the inevitable." He turned to Frank, Daniel, and Emma. "I accept the first option. I'll cooperate fully. I'll confess my crimes and help dismantle the corruption network I've created." Frank stepped forward, his face a mask of disbelief. "Why should we believe you? You've spent your entire life lying and manipulating." Jack nodded. "You're right, and I don't expect you to trust me immediately, but I'm willing to prove it with actions, not just words." He turned to Jason. "I'm sorry, old friend. I appreciate your loyalty, but this is the end of the road for me." Jason stared at him for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "You were always unpredictable, Jack. I guess this is your final move." With a gesture, Jason ordered his men to lower their weapons. "Good luck, Jack. You're going to need it." With those words, Jason and his team withdrew from the room, leaving behind a silence charged with tension. Jack turned to Frank, Daniel, and Emma. "I know I have no right to ask for anything, but if you're going to do this, let's do it right. I want to confess everything, but I need guarantees that my child will be protected." Frank exchanged a look with Daniel before slowly nodding. "Very well, Jack, but understand this. There's no turning back. Once you start talking, you can't stop." "I understand," Jack replied. Then, looking directly at Emma, he added, "And I accept it." Emma, who had remained silent, stepped forward. "Why now, Jack? What has changed?" Jack looked at her, his eyes full of regret and determination. "Everything has changed, Emma. I have changed. When I planned to abandon you, I was blinded by greed and fear. But now I see things clearly for the first time in years." He approached her, stopping a few steps away. "I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't even expect you to believe me. But I want our child to grow up knowing that, in the end, his father did the right thing." Emma stared at him intently, searching his eyes for any sign of deception. After a moment, she nodded almost imperceptibly. Daniel, who had been observing the exchange in silence, intervened. "We should move. The police will be here soon." Frank nodded. "Daniel's right. Jack, you'll come with us. We have a lot of work ahead." As they left the conference room, Jack found himself walking alongside Emma. Without looking at her, he spoke in a low voice. "I'm sorry for all the harm I've caused you, Emma. To you and our child." Emma didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice was barely a whisper. "Words are easy, Jack. Prove it with actions." Jack nodded, accepting the implicit challenge in her words. As they walked down the hospital corridor, Jack felt a strange mixture of fear and relief. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, perhaps the most challenging he had ever faced. But for the first time in a long time, he felt he was making the right choice. The empire of shadows he had built was crumbling, but from its ruins, Jack hoped to construct something new, something better. Not for himself, but for the child who would carry his name, for the legacy he now realized was truly important. With each step, Jack left behind the man he had been and moved towards an uncertain future. But in that uncertainty, there was also a glimmer of hope. Hope for redemption. Hope for a second chance. Hope to finally become the man he should have been all along. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Jack, true to his word, began to unravel the complex web of corruption he had woven over the years. Sitting in an interrogation room, with Frank, Daniel, and a team of investigators listening intently, Jack revealed names, dates, transactions, and secrets that would shake the foundations of the business and political world. "Mayor Thompson," Jack said, his voice tired but firm. "He was key in approving the Golden Coast project. We paid him $2 million through a series of shell companies." Daniel, who was taking notes furiously, looked up. "Do you have proof?" Jack nodded. "In the safe in my office, there's a USB drive with all the details. The password is Emma's birth date." Frank, who had been listening in silence, intervened. "Jack, you understand that every name you mention, every transaction you reveal, sinks you deeper, right?" Jack looked him directly in the eyes. "I know, and I'm prepared to face the consequences." Meanwhile, outside the interrogation room, the world Jack had built was rapidly crumbling. Newspaper headlines screamed about the scandal. Jack Thornton's real estate empire built on corruption. Politicians and businessmen implicated in mega fraud. Emma, observing everything from a distance, found herself divided between satisfaction at seeing justice served and an unexpected sense of loss. One night, while watching the news in her apartment, she felt the baby kick strongly. "I know. Little one," she murmured, caressing her belly. "It's complicated." As the days passed, the list of those implicated grew. Judges, politicians, other businessmen. No one seemed safe from the avalanche of revelations. Jack, true to his word, spared no details, even when it meant implicating himself more deeply. One afternoon, after a long interrogation session, Frank approached Jack. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, curiosity evident in his voice. "Thought you could have negotiated a lighter sentence. You could have hidden some things, but you're giving up everything." Jack, with deep dark circles under his eyes and his face haggard from fatigue, responded, "Because it's the right thing to do, Frank. And because I want my child to grow up in a world a little better than the one I helped create." Frank looked at him for a long moment, before slowly nodding. "I never thought I'd say this, Jack, but I respect what you're doing." As the investigation progressed, the impact of Jack's revelations was felt throughout the country. Companies collapsed, politicians resigned, and the judicial system was shaken to its foundations. The empire Jack had built over decades crumbled in a matter of weeks, but as his old world fell apart, Jack felt a strange sense of liberation. For the first time in years, he could look at himself in the mirror without feeling the weight of his lies and betrayals. One morning, as he was being led back to his cell after another interrogation session, Jack found himself face to face with Emma, who was waiting in the hallway. "Emma," he said, surprised, "what are you doing here?" She looked at him, her expression a mixture of conflicting emotions. "I wanted to see you. I wanted to understand." Jack nodded, aware of the guards waiting patiently a few meters away. "And have you found what you were looking for?" Emma placed a hand on her belly, now visibly larger. "I don't know, but I think you're doing the right thing, for the first time in a long time." Jack felt something loosen in his chest. It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly, but it was a start. "Thank you, Emma. That means a lot." Before he could say anything else, the guards indicated it was time to move. As he walked away, Jack turned one last time to Emma. "Take care of our child," he said softly. "Make sure he knows that, in the end, his father tried to do the right thing." Emma nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I will." As Jack was led back to his cell, he felt a strange sense of peace. His empire had fallen, his freedom was lost, but for the first time in decades, Jack Thornton felt truly free. 6 months had passed since Jack Thornton had begun his confession. The world he once dominated had transformed unrecognizably. His testimony had triggered a series of investigations that shook the foundations of society, from politics to business. On a cold autumn morning, Jack found himself sitting in the prison's visiting room, waiting. The chains on his wrists clinked softly every time he moved, a constant reminder of his new reality. The door opened and Emma entered, her figure already recovered after giving birth. In her arms, she carried a small bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. "Hello, Jack," she said, her voice a mixture of caution and something that could have been compassion. "Emma," he responded, his eyes fixed on the baby, "is "Is that him?" She nodded, approaching the table. Carefully, she adjusted the baby in her arms so Jack could see him better. "Jack, meet Matthew." Jack held his breath. The baby was perfect, with a tuft of dark hair and curious eyes that scanned the room. "He's beautiful," he whispered. Emma sat across from him, placing Matthew on her lap. "It's been a long time, Jack. Things have changed." Jack nodded, unable to take his eyes off his son. "I know, I've been following the news. It's incredible to see how everything has unraveled." "Your confessions changed everything," Emma said. "No one expected you to be so thorough." Jack finally looked up at her. It was the right thing to do. For the first time in my life, I did the right thing. There was a moment of silence, broken only by Matthew's soft gurgles. Finally, Emma spoke again. "Frank and Daniel wanted me to tell you something," she said, her voice cautious. "Due to your cooperation, they're considering recommending a reduction in your sentence." Jack blinked, surprised. I didn't expect that," Emma continued. "They also asked me to ask if you would be willing to testify in some of the upcoming trials. Your testimony could be crucial." Jack leaned back in his chair, processing the information. Part of him wanted to refuse, to end all of this once and for all. But another part, a part that was growing stronger every day, knew he still had a role to play in repairing the damage he had caused. "I'll do it," he finally said. "If my testimony can help bring justice, I'll do it." Emma nodded, and for a moment, Jack thought he saw a glimmer of pride in her eyes. Then, to his surprise, she extended Matthew towards him. Do you want to hold him?" With trembling hands, Jack held his son for the first time. The weight of the baby in his arms, the warmth of his small body, triggered something inside him. Tears he had been holding back for months began to flow freely. "I'm sorry," he whispered, both to Emma and Matthew. "I'm so sorry." Emma, with tears in her own eyes, reached out and placed her hand on Jack's. "I know," she said softly. "I know." As he held his son, Jack felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Hope that, despite all his mistakes, he could still leave a positive legacy. Hope that, maybe someday, he could earn the forgiveness of those he had hurt. And as Matthew looked at him with innocent and trusting eyes, Jack made a silent promise. He promised to be the kind of man, the kind of father that his son could admire. No matter how long it took, no matter how difficult the road ahead, Jack Thornton was determined to redeem himself. 3 years had passed since that day in the prison's visiting room. The outside world had changed dramatically, largely due to Jack's revelations. Companies had fallen, politicians had been imprisoned, and a new era of transparency and accountability seemed to be emerging from the ashes of the old system. Jack, now with his hair streaked with grey and worry lines etched on his face, stood before the prison gates. His sentence had been considerably reduced, thanks to his continued cooperation and testimony in numerous high-profile trials. As the gates opened, Jack blinked in the sunlight, brighter and warmer than he remembered. And there, waiting for him, were Emma and Matthew. The boy, now almost 4 years old, shyly hid behind his mother's legs. Jack approached slowly, aware that for Matthew, he was practically a stranger. "Hello, Matthew," he said softly, kneeling to be at the child's eye level. "Do you remember me? I'm your dad." Matthew looked at him curiously, his eyes so similar to Jack's, studying him intently. After a moment, the boy took a tentative step forward. "Mommy showed me pictures of you," Matthew said, his voice small but clear. "She says you've been helping people." Jack felt his heart swell with emotion. He looked at Emma, who nodded slightly, a small smile on her lips. "That's right, Matthew," Jack replied. "I've been trying to fix some mistakes I made, to make the world a better place for you." Matthew seemed to consider this for a moment, before taking another step forward and, to Jack's surprise, extending his small arms for a hug. Jack gently embraced him, silent tears rolling down his cheeks. Emma approached, placing a hand on Jack's shoulder. "Come on," she said softly. It's time to go home. As they walked towards the car, Jack noticed a group of journalists in the distance, kept at bay by security guards. His release, apparently, was still news. "How have things been?" Jack asked Emma as they drove away from the prison. Emma sighed. "Difficult, but improving. Your trust fund for the victims of corruption has helped a lot of people. And Matthew, well, he's an amazing kid." Jack nodded, looking in the rearview mirror at Matthew, who was happily playing with a small toy car. "And you? How have you been?" Emma was silent for a moment. "It's been a journey, Jack. There were days when I hated you, days when I missed you, days when I didn't know what to feel. But seeing you change, seeing you really try to do the right thing, that has meant a lot." Jack nodded, overwhelmed with emotion. "Thank you, Emma, for giving me this chance. I know I don't deserve it." "I'm not doing it just for you," she replied, looking at Matthew in the rearview mirror. "I'm doing it for him. He deserves to know his father, the man you've become, not just the legend of the man you were." The rest of the trip passed in comfortable silence, occasionally interrupted by Matthew's curious questions about the buildings and landscapes they passed. Finally, they arrived at a modest house in the suburbs, very different from the luxurious mansion where Jack and Emma used to live. "It's beautiful," Jack said sincerely as they got out of the car. Emma smiled. "It's home." As they entered the house, Jack noticed the photos on the walls. There were many of Matthew at different stages of his growth, some with Emma, others with her parents, and to his surprise, there were also some photos of him, including a recent one taken in prison during a visit. "I wanted Matthew to know you, even if it was through photos," Emma explained, noticing his gaze. Jack felt a lump in his throat. "Thank you," was all he could say. The following days were a whirlwind of adjustments and discoveries. Jack had to learn to navigate this new world, so different from the one he had left behind. The news continued to talk about the trials and investigations that his testimony had triggered, but now they did so with a different tone. He was no longer the villain of the story, but a man who had chosen the path of redemption. One afternoon, while playing with Matthew in the garden, Jack received an unexpected call. "Jack, it's Frank." Jack instinctively tensed, but forced himself to relax. "Frank, it's been a while." "Yes, it has," Frank replied. "Listen, I know this might sound strange, but we're organizing a conference on business ethics and corporate transparency. We were wondering if you'd be willing to give a talk." Jack was speechless for a moment. Are you sure?" "Completely," Frank said. "Your story, Jack, is powerful. It shows that change is possible, that redemption is real. You could make a real difference." Jack looked at Matthew, who was laughing as he chased a butterfly around the garden. "I'll do it," he finally said, "but on one condition, which is, I want any fee or donation to go directly to the victims' fund." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Done," Frank said, and Jack could hear the smile in his voice. "Welcome back, Jack." That night, after putting Matthew to bed, Jack found himself sitting on the porch with Emma, looking at the stars. "Frank called me today," he said, breaking the silence. Emma looked at him, curious. "Oh, what did he want?" Jack told her about the conference and his decision to participate. When he finished, Emma was watching him with an expression he couldn't decipher. "What do you think?" he asked, nervous. Emma smiled softly. "I think you're on the right path, Jack. It won't be easy. There will be people who will never forgive you, who will always see you as the man you were. But if you can help prevent others from making the same mistakes, if you can use your experience to make the world a better place, then all of this will have been worth it." Jack took Emma's hand, grateful for her support. "I can't change the past," he said, "but I can work for a better future. For Matthew, for you, for everyone I hurt." Emma squeezed his hand. "One day at a time, Jack. One day at a time." As they sat there, under the starry sky, Jack felt a peace he had never experienced before. The road ahead would be long and difficult, full of challenges and obstacles. But for the first time in his life, Jack Thornton was ready to face them with honesty, integrity, and renewed purpose. The empire of shadows had fallen, But from its ashes, something new and hopeful was beginning to emerge. 5 more years had passed since Jack's release. Life had taken a direction that he couldn't have imagined, even in his most optimistic dreams. The conference on business ethics had been just the beginning. His story, the fall and redemption of Jack Thornton, had become a case study in universities across the country. On a sunny spring morning, Jack found himself standing in front of an auditorium filled with law and business students. At 55, grey dominated his hair, but his eyes shone with a vitality and purpose that contrasted with the man he once was. "Power and money," he began, his voice resonating in the silent auditorium, "can be addictive. They convince you that you're above the rules, that the end justifies the means. I lived that lie for decades. I built an empire on the foundations of corruption and greed, and when it all crumbled, I thought it was the end." He paused, looking at the attentive faces of the students. "But it turns out that the end of my empire was just the beginning of my true legacy. I learned, in the hardest way possible, that integrity and ethics are not obstacles to success. They are the foundation of lasting and meaningful success." As Jack continued his talk, in the last row of the auditorium, Emma and Matthew, now 9 years old, listened attentively. Matthew looked at his father with a mixture of pride and admiration. After the talk, as students approached Jack to ask questions, Matthew gently tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Mom," he said, his eyes bright, "when I grow up, I want to be like Dad." Emma smiled, stroking her son's hair. "Like the businessman he was?" Matthew shook his head. "No, like the man he is now, someone who helps people be better." Emma felt her eyes fill with tears. "That's a wonderful goal, honey." Later that day, the family gathered for dinner. Jack, still excited by the response to his talk, couldn't stop smiling. "You know," he said, looking at Emma and Matthew, "there was a time when I thought my legacy would be the buildings I built, the fortunes I amassed. But now I see that the true legacy is this, the opportunity to make a positive difference, to inspire others to do the right thing." Emma took his hand across the table. "You've come a long way, Jack, we all have." Matthew, with the innocent wisdom of a child, added, "And we still have a long way to go. Right, Dad?" Jack nodded, ruffling his son's hair. "That's right, champ. There's always more to do, more ways to improve." That night, after putting Matthew to bed, Jack and Emma sat on the porch, as they had done so many nights before. The fresh spring air carried with it the promise of new beginnings. "Do you ever," Emma began, her voice soft in the stillness of the night, "regret having confessed, having let it all crumble?" Jack considered the question for a moment before responding. "There were moments, especially at the beginning, when I wondered if I had done the right thing. But now, looking back, I see that it was the best decision I ever made. Not just for me, but for everyone affected by my actions." He turned to Emma, their eyes meeting in the dim light. "And for us, for this second chance you gave me that we gave ourselves." Emma smiled, a smile full of love and understanding. "You know, when I discovered your plan to abandon us, I thought I would hate you forever. I planned my revenge so meticulously, but seeing you change, seeing you struggle to be better, made me realize that true love isn't just about the good times. It's about growing together, overcoming obstacles, forgiving." Jack pulled her close, hugging her tightly. "I love you, Emma. Thank you for not giving up on me." As they sat there, under the starry sky, Jack reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. From corrupt magnate to repentant prisoner, and now to a man dedicated to making a positive difference in the world. His empire of shadows had fallen, but from its ruins had emerged something much more valuable, a united family, a renewed purpose, and the opportunity to rewrite his legacy. The path had not been easy, and Jack knew there were still challenges ahead. But with Emma and Matthew by his side, and with the determination to keep doing the right thing, he was ready to face any obstacle. As the night progressed, Jack Thornton, once the king of a corrupt empire, now found himself as the architect of his own redemption. And in that moment, under the stars, with his family close, he knew that he had finally found the true wealth he had always sought.